Our game of heavyweight live event catch-up continues here at the Combot Collective as we cover Robots Live Crawley, the first of only 3 more events left for us to cover here before we can finally talk about our final overall TCC rankings for the 2021 to 2022 season. We're so excited to talk about that, but first, we got to run down the 13 robots which competed in this Robots Live Crawley event. This was the first event we talked about here at the Combot Collective, and now we're coming full circle. Stay tuned for some results here.
Enough energy to get in the flip on Carbine. We're going to go all the way.
Oh my God! That's going to hurt. Grab the milk, Kenny.
Welcome to the Combot Collective.
Hello everybody and welcome to yet another live event breakdown here at the Combot Collective, bringing everything you want to know from the world of robot combat, from the heavyweight class to the fleetweight class, from Battlebots to the live circuit, and we're going all the way back to the UK, going back to Robots Live for our first of 3 UK live events that happened before our deadline of October 18th this year. And some of them cut it close. We have Robots Live Crawley we're talking about today, and then we have Robo Riot Dublin, which we're going to be talking about later, and then of course we have Extreme Robots Maidstone, which will be our next live event rundown. We have some results for that and a championship change. We'll talk about more of that later. But like I said, today is all about Robots Live Crawley, and I said at the top of the video, our very first UK live event rundown was Crawley 2021. We're going to see how it has to play out this year. A smaller field for Crawley this year compared to last year, but we do have some new robots that haven't appeared in the TCC overall rankings yet. Machines like Weird Mouse and Battlebots hopeful Vanguard. Excited to finally talk about them. They're co-captained by Zach, friend of the Combot Collective. But let's not get to yabbering too much. This happened in the same venue as last year. It was a packed crowd, a weekend event, which happened in mid to late September. Shoutouts once again to Team Ironclads. These are always the guys to help us get footage for these UK live event videos. They are responsible for any footage that you see in our corner screen, as always, for these events. Their link to their channel will be below. They already have footage for Robot Riot Dublin, so if you want to see the fights before we talk about that event, they're all right there. They also have a couple Extreme Robots fights. Be sure to check it out, but that's enough yammering for me. We got 13 robots to talk about here, and speaking of Team Ironclads, we're starting off with them. Let's get it going right here. And yes, like I said, we kick off our video discussing a handful of robots which did not partake in the main 8-robot Crawley Championship tournament, relegating themselves to these multi-robot melees at the competition. And who better to start with our friends, like I said, Team Ironclads. I can never put over enough how essential they are to these TCC live event rundown videos. Unfortunately though, their losing ways from Robots Live Stoke did continue here as the crew fell to a combined 0-4 on the weekend, with both middleweight and heavyweight going 0-2. Audacious found itself on the losing end of various melees versus robots like Tanshe, Weird Malice, Two-Headed Death Flamingo, Eruption, among others. In one of its melees, it would be unceremoniously dumped out of the arena by Tanshe, but in the other, Audacious would pull off a rarity and survive until the end of the fight versus some Goliath heavyweights. A feat in itself, but the team's banner robot Thunderchild not so lucky. 0-1 with a very early KO against Tectonic and Nuts here as the tough luck continues for our favorite UK team. We know that Thunderchild has some solid flipper power, but it's proven there's not much else to say about this tough outing. We hope for the best for Team Ironclads. We love those guys. So a robot I'm shocked is not a part of our TCC overall rankings list up to this point in the 2021-22 calendar season is Weird Malice, an all-time classic of a robot competing since around 2003 to 2006, but has never really been a championship contender, but definitely a regular in nearly every event nonetheless. It's been all Extreme Robots for Team Weird Alice up to this point this year, but now we get to see it in action for ourselves finally in full-on matches, and it's unfortunately another tough outing for the Black and Green machine, suffering a pair of knockout losses in its only 2 melees, with Weird Malice driving into the pit in less than a minute during its first fight, and then getting stuck on the arena wall for a KO loss in the final moments against Tanshe in its second. A heartbreaking week for Team Weird Alice, but They have been having a little bit more luck on the Extreme Robots circuit, and there's another event for them coming up. We'll have to see how they end off their year. Now, two-headed Death Flamingo has been treated like a contender this year, and to an extent has certainly proven it with the aggressive A placing third at the Crawley event last year, giving it enough credibility to take the role of temporary Captain Robot during the May Extreme Robots event in 2022. But that credibility and good fortune did not carry through to the 2022 Crawley Championship, as despite its incredibly underrated control and driving, two-headed Death Flamingo would go 0-3 in its melees with the KO loss mixed in there, and then lose in round 1 of the championship brackets to Jotun. We saw the Flamingo grow distance and show potential against prominent robots like Eruption, Nuts, Jotun, and Tectonic, but would fall via knockout in a later melee where Tanshe would dominate all of its opponents. Finally, some bracket talk here. Two-headed Death Flamingo would meet with the aforementioned recent holder of 4th place at Robots Live Stoke, Jotun, in the first round of this 8-robot tournament. Two-headed Death Flamingo played to his strengths with his overwhelming width and its ability to have easy control, taking a strangle in a good portion of the fight, but unfortunately Jotun's unique Brit flipper shape made it very tricky for two-headed Death Flamingo to land any real significant flamingo pecks with its axe during these moments of control, often eventually leaving itself open for some vicious flips by Jotun. Flips which Jotun did plenty of, landing 12 flips in 15 attempts. Jotun would also show some good control in this fight itself, keeping two-headed Death Flamingo under the arena hammers quite a bit during the fight's second half. All this enough to knock the bird out of the tournament early and leave the boys in pink at 0-4 total. You know, we saw some teams at Battlebots this year once again donning those two-headed Death Flamingo colors and uniforms. Maybe a good year in 2022, 2023, maybe multiple 3rd place, 2nd place, maybe even 1st place placements can get them into Battlebots next time. I think a few more improvements are going to have to be made. Those weapons are going to have to be a little bit more damaging, a bit more impactful. But I certainly think it can be done. I love this robot. A lot of character. Now from one axe spot we go to another in Team Asgard's Robot Wars Series 10 veteran machine Apocalypse. A design which we've seen in action since 2016 at Robots Live. A tried and true formula, but not one which we've seen have much success, despite the Combot Collective being quite impressed with Apocalypse's driving during its last appearances at Crawley 2021 and at Saudi Arabia a month later. Apocalypse would unfortunately go winless once again here, staying winless for all of 2021 and 2022. 0-4 total on the weekend with 3 judges' decision losses and 1 KO loss. Nearly 2, as when one of these judges' decision defeats, it would be bullied around quite a bit by the flipper Tanshe, ending up flipped over and stuck on the wall on multiple occasions, but able to revive itself before the end of the fight, making it the distance. Apocalypse, though, not so lucky in the melee versus the likes of Weird Malice, two-headed Death Flamingo, and of course, once again, Tanshe, the winner of this fight, and the robot which threw Apocalypse out of the arena only moments into this melee. For not really many axe spots left in the UK scene, and that's really the only place where they were to begin with, so hopefully we can see more Apocalypse in his next coming year. Meggamouse, of course the offspring to the legendary Mighty Mouse, rode in a little bit higher than usual for his Robots Live Crawley stop, given that Team Mouse had just placed 2nd at Robots Live's prior event at Stoke-on-Trent, only losing to Tectonic in the final. Unfortunately, Meggamouse would lose a bit of that momentum at the recent Extreme Robots stop in September, and here a few weeks later the Mouse will go totally winless, getting knocked out in the event championship round 1 and losing via judge's decision in 2 fights. In the Mouse's first fight on the weekend, it would find itself in an absolute banger of a melee versus Ironclads 6 and the Battlebots' hopeful Vanguard. Meggamouse would unfortunately get outflipped by a narrow margin of 6-3-9 in favor of course Ironclads, who dominated the start and ended the bout, getting some beautiful flips on Vanguard. Its second melee though wasn't so beautiful, being slotted in a 6 robot cluster, which had the Mouse getting absolutely bullied by eventual melee winner Eruption for a vast majority of it. And unfortunately for Meggamouse, the bullying from Eruption would not stop here, as in round 1 of the Crawley Championship, Meggamouse was all alone in the Robots Live arena with Eruption. And Meggamouse would get a pair of flips in the match, but really it was academic for Michael Oates and Eruption from start to finish, as Eruption had Meggamouse upside down in the opening second of the fight, and just 6 flips later, Meggamouse would find itself clear out of the arena in merely over a minute. A dominant performance by Eruption as usual, but a serious bummer for the veterans in Team Mouse. 4-1 at Stoke and 0-3 at Crawley. Bit of a contrast there, and it's a tough one. Hopefully we can see them rebound at Extreme Robots later on in the year. Oh boy, now here's a robot we knew would be making its TCC ranking debut here with its appearance at Robots Live Crawley 2022, as we discuss friends in the collective, Zach and Jack Tweedy's own Vanguard, a robot we've seen have a good amount of hype built around it over the past couple of years. It's a spiritual successor to the Battlebots 2018 competitor Vanquish, but with much more sturdiness in both the weapon and body of the robot, along with quite decent lifting power also. We've heard reports from co-captain Zach himself that Battlebots co-founder Greg Munson was quite impressed with the design, power, and capability of Vanguard, but unfortunately those perks wouldn't be enough for it to qualify for the 2021 and 2022 Battlebots seasons. Instead, we've seen Vanguard cut its teeth at Extreme Robots back in May, and now here at Robots Live Crawley with presumably Jack Tweedy behind the wheel for these fights. Sadly for Vanguard, it's a robot designed to tank spinner power and use that to its advantage, and the new robot doesn't really have that sort of edge in a sportsman style event such as the ones that we see in Robots Live. This left Vanguard seriously struggling in a pair of melees which would be won by Audacious and Tectonic respectively. Vanguard would hold its own in the first of these melees, a fight we just mentioned a couple moments ago with Meggamouse at Iron. Like we mentioned, Vanguard would flip its flipper brethren over 3 times during this melee, but would for the most part be outclassed by its veteran challengers, left struggling on one side of its drive for most of the match. Its second fight was a 4-way dance featuring the likes of Apocalypse, Weird Malice, and of course the aforementioned winner Tectonic. Vanguard would suffer even more drive struggles here and even almost got sent out of the arena by Tectonic, but the Team Shock robot did not have the needed power to hoist Vanguard over, so overall, for Vanguard's first ranked event, it's 0-2 with a pair of judges' decision defeats, enough for a number 59 overall ranking on our list as of right now, with 2 more events left to be tallied on there. Jumping into our second half here, I'm pretty excited for this one. The Combot Collective finally gets to talk about some nuts for the first time this year. Perhaps the most beloved UK robot right now, a fan favorite which everyone remembers dominating at Robot Wars Series 10, placing 3rd overall at that huge event, but Team Monsoon's newest member, Team Ruts' captain Rory Mangles, has not yet had that kind of success at another event since late 2017. Last year at Crawley, we saw Nuts struggle in a sportsman bracket where there was no deadly spinner or crusher to snipe the chains or hydraulics of. So without that and without the mini-bot, Nuts kind of ends up just being a target for punishment at these Robots Live sportsman competitions, something reflected by its abysmal 0-3 weekend with mostly knockout losses. In the 2 melees we partook in, like we mentioned, Nuts just sort of ends up being a punching bag here when it doesn't have the mini-bots in large arena to get that full melty brain up to spinning speed. That speed is when Nuts is lethal and when Nuts is a proper challenger, and it lacked here as the only melee and fight it managed to go the distance and was that 6-way fracas won by Eruption. In that fight, Nuts may have survived, but caught the ire of Robots Live house robot Goliath, getting bullied by the robotic beast for a majority of the fight's second half, even getting its wheel busted by the bot. Later on in a 3-way dance between Nuts, Tectonic, and Thunderchild, the Melty Brain almost won on default in the opening seconds when Tectonic flipped Thunderchild and itself over, with both robots struggling to get back up. This moment let Nuts get its best offense of the weekend on a struggling Tectonic, who would eventually get up and follow through with some great driving and control by its driver Will Thomas, as he went on to flip Nuts 20 times in the following minutes, the last of these being a perfect sinker right into the pit for a knockout. Now we go to the Crawley Championship bracket fight. Nuts head around 1, as it managed to qualify with a respectful performance against Tectonic despite the knockout. Unfortunately though for Rory Mangles, Nuts would draw the 2021 Crawley runner-up, Iron 6 in the first round. Nuts would only find itself getting up to full spinning speed once in this fight, but the pyramid shape of Iron would be a perfect reflector of these chains and flails, as the former FRA UK champ mostly had its way with the slippery Nuts, going 13 for 15 on flips against the Melty Brain, the 13th of which sending Nuts clear out of the arena and out of the tournament early. Hopefully in 22 to 23, we can see Nuts potentially switch over to some Extreme Robots events, perhaps maybe alongside the new buddies Monsoon. That may be what Nuts needs to find success again, and maybe add some mini bots. We'll have to see what Rory Mangles and the team does. We certainly hope to get to see them fight sooner rather than later. Now we move on to the real big names here. Our 5 robots which really stole the show at Crawley, our top 5 finishing competitors, and once again we start off with Tanshe on the outside looking in. Tanshe of course comes from the brilliant minds of John Reed and Gabriel Plantaget, who recently came back from Battlebots 2022 with Tanshe's hammer-wielding sister Beta. Tanshe has been one of our most consistent robots in the TCC overall rankings, finishing 2nd at Saudi Arabia, 5th on Stoke-on-Trent, and now once again 5th at Crawley here with a 2-1 record. Tanshe kicked off its week looking very impressive, qualifying for the Crawley Championship bracket in a 3-way featuring Apocalypse and Yotan. Like we mentioned earlier in the video, Apocalypse would struggle heavily during this fight, while Tanshe and Yotan primarily went head-to-head, with Yotan miraculously managing to just outflip Tanshe by a 6-7 margin, Tanshe going 6-8 on flip attempts. But despite this, Tanshe would be the one to dispatch both Apocalypse and Yotan in the corner for a near knockout win, as the fight would end up going to the judge's decision. Tanshe's most impressive performance though had to be the 5-way fracas featuring the likes of Audacious, Two-Headed Death Flamingo, Weird Malice, and once again Apocalypse. This performance by Tanshe was insane. 4 opponents, 2 robots in Apocalypse and Audacious thrown out of the arena, 2 robots and Two-Headed Death Flamingo and Weird Malice knocked out, all in under 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Probably the most impressive knockout of the entire weekend, and a match which one would think would give Tanshe some proper momentum in this Crawley Championship tournament. Unfortunately though for Tanshe and Team Legion, just like at Stoke-on-Trent, the former TIFR finalist would once again draw a recent Robots Live Stoke winner in round 1. At Stoke, it was Eruption sending Tanshe out for an early exit, but this time it would be the winner of that Stoke event, Tectonic, challenging Tanshe in round 1. In a battle of the killer T's, Tanshe's opponent Tectonic quite frankly wasn't looking all that hot. The series of fights Tectonic had up to this point was certainly catching up, as Will Thomas's flipper was barely able to get any airtime from its flips. A common issue for flippers and a very common issue for Team Shock this year across all of its flippers. It seemed like a safe victory for Tanshe, but where Tectonic lacked in flipper power, its driver Will Thomas made up in control and ability, as Tectonic would still dominate this fight, outflipping Tanshe by a 20-6 margin despite Tanshe's flipper packing a much bigger punch. With this, Tanshe ends its event at 2-1, its 3rd straight winning record to finish, and Tanshe now sits at a very comfortable number 17 on our TCC overall rankings. Now we move on to our proper top 4, a group which outside of no Meggamouse looks pretty much the exact same as the robots we saw during Stoke-on-Trent. And just like Tanshe finishing 5th in Stoke, we also saw Yotan finishing 4th in back-to-back events as well with Crawley 2022. Yotan, the fairly unknown and underrated flipper from Team Outlaw, the same crew which has brought us former Robot Wars finalist Ironside 3, has been fighting in various live tour competitions since 2016, but like we mentioned in that Stoke video, Yotan is still looking for a championship finish higher than 3rd. Unfortunately for Yotan, this would not be its month, finishing once again with a losing 1-4 record. Yotan would have a pair of losing melees during this event, the first of which being the Tanshe and Apocalypse 3-way we mentioned just moments ago, as like we said, Yotan would outflip Tanshe, but not outlast Team Legion, as Yotan would survive in that fight but failed to get the judge's nod. In the other melee Yotan was featured in, and we saw it in that 6-way rumble we brought up a few times already this episode, the one which Eruption would win, but one where Yotan would hold its own, flipping the likes of Two-Headed Death Flamingo and Tectonic multiple times, staying in the fight, but not delivering the same impact as Eruption and Tectonic, giving it the judge's decision loss, the 2nd for that event. But now let's talk about its Crawley Championship run in a bit more detail, get a bit deeper into these bracket rounds here. As like we mentioned near the top of the video, in round 1 we saw Yotan battle the boys in pink with Two-Headed Death Flamingo, doing pretty solid with Yotan managing 12 flips and 15 attempts, along with keeping up against Flamingo's nearly unrivaled control game by keeping Two-Headed Death Flamingo under the arena hammers for a good portion of this fight. This would be a judge's decision win for Team Outlaw and Yotan, the only win they pick up in this event, because it was on to this Crawley semifinals versus Ironaut 6. We won't spend too much time talking about this fight because quite frankly, what is there to talk about? Ironaut 6 would outmatch Yotan from the jump, flipping it 7 times unanswered, with the last of these flips perhaps being the flip of the event. Ironaut 6 would shoot Yotan on a flip that sailed Team Outlaw's machine what looked to be, I mean, it was a weird angle, 8 feet over, flying directly over the arena pit and clean over the out of the arena wall. Another tough loss for Yotan, who once again has to settle for a potential top 3 finish and hope to not be on the outside looking into the podium. Now, before we get to that third place playoff, let's talk about Yotan's opponent in that match, the winner of our recent Robots Live Stoke event, Tectonic, who is always one of the most active machines at these competitions, fighting in 7 matches and going 4-3 total in all these fights. In total, Tectonic would partake in 3 tournament one-on-ones and 4 melees, picking up 2 wins and 2 losses in the melee round, with Tectonic scoring the win in aforementioned melees featuring the likes of Thunderchild, Weird Malice, Nuts, Apocalypse, and Vanguard, but also taking multiple losses during the aforementioned 6-robot melee where Tectonic spent most of his time struggling with Yotan, and an all-star melee we haven't had a chance to discuss yet, one that actually featured the top 3 this entire event, with Tectonic versus Eruption versus Iron 6, our lineup. This melee had all 3 robots predictably looking quite impressive, with Team Shock's Tectonic actually managing an early lead on flips but would be pitted around halfway through. Eventually, this fight would go to Eruption, outflipping the others on a 15 to 13 to 7 margin, but more on that fight later with the other 2 robots we have left to talk about. Back to the Crawley Championship, we had Tectonic looking to go for back-to-back trophies at Robots Live after the Stoke victory, and it seemed like momentum was on Team Shock's side after the Tanshe versus Tectonic round 1 match we discussed earlier. Tectonic made use of its controlling ability where its power failed and outflipped Tanshe 20-6, winning via judge's decision and moving on to take none other than perhaps its biggest rival this year, Eruption, in a semi-finals match. Tectonic has been the only robot to solve the Eruption equation this year, defeating it once at Extreme Robots and twice at Robots Live this calendar year, but would not be so lucky in yet another rematch between the pair here, as Eruption would absolutely humiliate Tectonic this time by sending it clear over the out of the arena wall in less than a minute. No two-peat for Team Shock here. But now this sets the stage for our third place playoff. 2 robots in Yotan and Tectonic, which through both Stoke and Crawley, to this point at least, shockingly have not met one-on-one inside the Robots Live arena this year, besides the interactions they shared during the 6-way melee we discussed earlier. Just like in its fights versus Tanshe and Iron, Tectonic was struggling out the gate in terms of weapon power, so bad that at this point Tectonic was struggling to self-right. Despite this, Team Shock would outdrive their once rivals in Team Outlaw and lead themselves to 13 successful flips to Yotan against Yotan's 6 to Tectonic. The tables would turn by the final minutes of the fight as an equally worn out Yotan would struggle to get up on its base, also getting saved surprisingly by Tectonic at the very end to make this fight go to the judge's decision. A sweet move by Tectonic, but a move which stole 2 points from it in our TCC overall rankings, as it still managed to win by judge's decision and place 3rd at Crawley 2022. Now let's get to our top 2 gold and silver medals here, and when you see who we have, I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. Just like it's been for the past few years in the UK, Iron 6 and Eruption still dominate the scene through incredible power and insane driving for each robot respectively, setting up an unsurprising top 2 here as we start with the 2019 FRA UK champion Iron 6. This is Iron 6's first Robots Live event since placing 2nd at Crawley 2021, but we have seen the robot appear a few times at Extreme Robots this year with slightly above average success. Not the best year Iron 6 has had, but still solid, with the flipper holding a 27 rank at the Combot Collective. At Crawley 2022, we saw the weekend finish with a humble 2-3 record, but some very impactful moments on the way to this championship fight. In its 2 melees, we saw Iron win in its first 3-way, featuring Vanguard and Meggamouse. Like we mentioned earlier, a great fight which the mouse would hold its own in, but one where Iron would end up winning. The Robot Wars Series 10 veteran, though, would not be so lucky in the All-Star 3-way we mentioned earlier, doing slightly better than Tectonic, making it the full 3 minutes, but still being outflipped Eruption by a mere 2 tosses, losing the judge's decision in that match. In the bracket, though, is where Iron 6 would shine, just as predicted. Iron 6's round 1 against Nuts, as we discussed earlier, Iron would bat 867 in this fight with 13 flips on the slippery Nuts in 15 attempts, with the fight ending via out of the arena. And then in the fight against Jotun, we would continue to see the aggression and power of Ironaut 6 when it would bully the blue flipper for just over a minute, delivering 7 flips in the most beautiful out of the arena the entire event, setting itself up for the second Crawley finale it's going to have in just as many years. On the other side of the coin, we have Eruption, and if you've been a regular watcher of TCC content, you know we've been talking all about Eruption for about as long as we've been doing this channel, with our first UK live event rundown being the 2021 Crawley event, which of course Eruption won, making it the defending city champion entering this event. We've seen Eruption dominate back-to-back Extreme Robots events and never placed lower than 3rd in any event so far this year, something which we'd see continue here with Eruption going 5-0 en route to the championship fight. Eruption had 3 melees, so we'll make this quick. Eruption of course won a 6-way melee featuring the likes of Jotun, Tectonic, and Meggamouse, bullying the latter of those 3 for most of the fight and winning by judge's decision. Eruption also won a pair of 3-ways, one fairly routine, being the middleweight Audacious and 2-headed Death Flamingo, and one much trickier in the Tectonic and Ironaut melee we've discussed plenty recently already. Entering the bracket though, it was smooth sailing as expected for Eruption, given a fairly smooth draw with the flipper facing Stoke on Trent, runner-up Meggamouse in round 1. Eruption, like we mentioned, has already drawn the ire of Team Mouse Summon this event already with the 6-way melee, and the ire will continue here. Eruption wins the quick flash in, outflipping Meggamouse by a 6-2 margin, with the fight ending via out of the arena. Now of course in the other semi-final we saw Ironaut flip Jotun out of the arena in just over a minute, and Team Invade Michael Oates was not going to be outdone, as in his aforementioned semi-final against his rival robot Tectonic, Eruption would throw the Team Shock robot clean out of the arena just like Ironaut did, but in nearly half the time. So that's where we sit now. Once again, 2 elite teams in Team Ironaut and Team Eruption. Like I mentioned, probably the 2 best Brit flippers in the world as we speak, and 2 robots which have met in this exact same venue for the Crawley finals last year. Last time these 2 met, Ironaut struggled to get out of the gate and Eruption dominated on its way to a judge's decision victory, taking the Crawley title home, and since then we've seen Eruption take some surprising losses, but we've also seen Team Ironaut have a fairly frustrating year in general. It was finally a championship rematch time though, and the top 32 TCC ranked robots were ready to go. Predictably, with 2 fantastic drivers like Michael Oates and Shane Lale, this fight was an absolute chess game. Both robots did their best to keep the flippers aimed forward, which led to very few openings for either robots to attack. But of the 2, Eruption would go on to dominate once again in terms of flips, going 13 for 14 in attempts and controlling most of the fight. But I would say that the first and last flips of this bout may have been the most impactful, and those were ones which came from Ironaut 6. Despite being the victim of 13 straight flips in this matchup, Ironaut 6 did kick off this fight with a massive flip to Eruption, the biggest of the match, but perhaps more impressively, to close out this Crawley event and to close out this fight, Ironaut 6 would wedge itself under the Robots Live house robot Goliath and almost flip it over. Ironaut lifted Goliath's left side with enough pop that the beast violently leaned to its right, only being saved by the sturdy Robots Live arena wall. Goliath would be saved by the bell as time would come up shortly after, but Eruption will be the one crowned our 2-time Crawley champion via judge's decision, as Eruption now leaves this event at 6-0, enough to keep its momentum strong for the final 2 Extreme Robots events this year, and to grant the number 8 position in our TCC overall rankings, while Ironaut sits at number 7. We know it has a few more fights and events to be tallied. Will Eruption make it to that number 1 spot before the end of the year? I would love to see that. See a non-Battlebots robot get in there after just enough grinding. We'll have to see how it plays out, but that's what we have. 13 robots up, 13 robots down at Robots Live Crawley. It was a pretty exciting event. Not as much variety as the 2021 event, I would say. We were missing a few key robots, but it was very good to see 2-headed Death Flamingo and Nuts again. We haven't seen those robots in what felt like forever, and quite frankly, Apocalypse too. Those are some Robots Live regulars which haven't been as visible that we've seen. We know they have done some exhibition stuff, which hasn't counted for the TCC rankings. We haven't done videos on them, but it was good to see them here. It was also good to see Meggamouse. Unfortunate that they had such a rough performance. Unfortunate that Tectonic wasn't able to defend its title, but it's good to see them in 3rd. Of course, our top 3 versus events, Tectonic in 3rd, Ironaut 6 in 2nd, Eruption in 1st. Our top 3 Our top 2, just like last year's Crawley events, Eruption 1st, Iron 6 2nd. We also had Yotan 4th, Tanshe 5th. Bunch of really solid flippers in the top 5 here, but once again we have Team Invade, Michael Oates, the whole Oates family with Eruption staying on top. I really do wonder if we're going to see them make the top spot in our TCC overall rankings a few weeks from now, but we're going to have to see how it plays out. Before we get there, we got to talk about Robot Riots in Dublin, the event hosted by Team Nemesis. And speaking of Team Nemesis, Dietor will be competing in that event, along with 2 versions of King B, multiple versions of Ripper as well. It's a very strange event, along with some other robots that will be new to the TCC overall rankings list, like Saint Ripper and Halo. We haven't seen Halo in a good while. We're also going to be talking about the Extreme Robots Maidstone event. That one happened literally just one day before TCC overall rankings switched over thanks to Battlebots. And we're also going to be covering the November Extreme Robots event in a later video. We got to play some catch up here and do those 3 events first. So some things to look forward to. We also got a news video coming up the pipeline about Deadlift retiring, news video about the Battlebots rules that I've been trying to organize but I've had some struggles with, but definitely some things to look forward here at the Combot Collective. I'm going to let you guys go though. I'm Sterling Brown as always. You can find me on Instagram at SterlingTXTG. As for the Combot Collective, join our Discord page. You can find it in the description below. All our YouTube upload news goes there first. We also have an Instagram and a Facebook that have special updates. You can follow those in the description below. And of course, right here on YouTube, please give us a like, comment, and a subscription. Ring that bell icon. We love to see all your support, your comments, your constructive criticism. Give us your thoughts about this Robots Live Crawley event. If you happen to be there or even competed there, give us your thoughts, your opinions, your build reports, whatever you want to share with us. We love your interactions here at TCC. That's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you at our next rundown event video talking about Extreme Robots Maidstone. We'll see you there.
This was the Combot Collective. Find us on Instagram and Discord.